What is up, everybody? This is Blackblade, and welcome to Game Talks, a series where I talk about the games I've been playing lately. This series is intended to be a replacement to my backlog babbles, but shorter, more dynamic, and quick to the point, which means I should probably talk about the game now. Go! Prince of Persia, The Sands of Time. This game is a classic in Ubisoft's archives that, if you grew up similar to me, you might not know anything about. My only experience with this series is the movie, one of the highest budget and highest grossing video game movies to date. I never really watched it though, not for lack of trying, but rather I comically fell asleep every time I sat down to watch it for reasons outside the movie itself. As a result, my knowledge of this game going into it was the following. There's an evil sorcerer dude, a hot princess lady, a dagger of time, the main character's a prince, and the game's set in Persia. Coolio, let's start the game. The Sands of Time perfectly encapsulates the era of gaming it came from, at least in regards to what adventure games were like around the same time. It's got a simple, easy-to-follow story, linear level design all about solving puzzles and stabbing things, clashy combat with as few mapped functions as possible to still contain a sense of flair, and a polished art style to keep the game's visuals appealing for as long as possible. We'll go into those elements shortly, but first, it's worth asking what separates this game from its competition. If you asked me, I'd say the primary selling point of Sands of Time is its movement mechanics. Much of the progress you make in this game involves chaining together your ability to run up or across walls, climb them to reach higher points, swing across poles or ropes, and more death-defying acrobatic stunts that will make you realize just how lethargic college life has made me. I mean you. The player you. No. Because this is such a focus, the developers made sure to put extra effort into the level design, which as a result is mostly excellent. Now and then there will be some confusion on where exactly the game wants you to go next, but for the most part, each new room or section of the palace you explore offers new and exciting platforming challenges. Some of my favorites were the zoo, the prison, the Hall of Learning, and the final tower. Okay, yeah, let me just, My favorites were the zoo, the prison, and the Hall of Learning. But the final tower just didn't sit well with me for some reason. Now while this is clearly the best part of the game for me, the combat was quite fun too. I was surprised to find how many people dislike it on some of the sites I looked at, because personally, I had a great time. Most melee-focused games use a hack-and-slash or beat-em-up style of combat, but Sands of Time mostly does its own thing. You've got simple sword attacks, blocks, dodges, parries, a couple flashier moves for vaulting over enemies or off walls, and lastly the dagger, which is used to finish off enemies and perform a few special abilities like slowing down time, freezing enemies in place for an easy killing blow, and lastly the Mega Freeze, which is insane. That's pretty much the core gameplay loop of Sands of Time. Acrobatic platforming and simple, clashy swordplay. It strikes up quite a few parallels to Assassin's Creed, and hey, what do you know? Even with liking that series, I must say Sands of Time handles these mechanics better, mainly in thanks to how polished they are. Plus, there's a final mechanic that serves to fully differentiate this game from any like it, and that's the Dagger of Time. I mentioned all the cool combat moves you can do with it, but you don't think this game would give you a weapon that can affect the passage of time without letting you make use of that, do you? Well, maybe. Depends on how much confidence you have in the team behind it. The point is, both in and out of combat, you have a set of charges with the dagger, allowing you to reverse time. This is a great addition to gameplay, as it allows platforming to be tight and precise, and the overall difficulty to be rather challenging, without causing frequent game overs and ceaseless frustration. Of course, that's only if you make mistakes, so I almost never needed to use it thanks to my unquestionable raw talent. Just don't fact check me by watching the footage. Got it? Good. So what about the rest of the game, you might ask? Is everything else just as great? Technically. I'd say yes, but moving onward, we'll start to see a few of the cracks that formed from this game's age. The music is the one other thing about the game I can say is fantastic. It mixes classic Arabic instruments. Did I really just say that? It mixes classic Arabic instruments with guitar riffs, giving it a heavy rock, or at times, even a metal vibe. It may not be a game soundtrack I'll listen to much outside of the context of the game itself, but still, I'm quite pleased with it. The visuals of the game have certainly aged by now, but thanks to the clean, distinguishable art style, it holds up well enough that I can't say anything bad about it. In exchange though, seemingly due to limitations with the engine properties, this game experienced lag spikes far too commonly to be excusable. I don't know if it's something to do with the Xbox version, or the fact I was emulating it through a 360, but both in and out of combat, the frame rate would dip, and it got incredibly obnoxious, especially during platforming since the game would require very precise inputs, so outside factors affecting your timing would ultimately result in... And my final, largest complaint with the game is in regards to the story and ending. I won't give spoilers for anything, but generally speaking, I found the story of this game to have overall a pretty good premise and conflict, but the characters ended up being super generic. The Vizier, who even looks like a Jafar wannabe, is the stereotypical scheming advisor. Farah is the usual feisty princess who inexplicably falls in love with the protagonist, and the protagonist is about as one note as you'd expect from a main character who doesn't even have a name. As a result, the fact the final chunk of this game banks entirely on your attachment to these three makes it fall kinda flat. This isn't helped by the fact the final boss and conclusion comes so abruptly, you forget it as fast as it happened. Final impressions for games are just as important as first, something I'm sure I'll talk about more when I finally play Mass Effect 3 with all I've heard about that game. And it's a shame how underwhelming the ending of Sands of Time turned out to be. If you ask me, it could be the reason this game is slowly and ironically fallen out of fame with people over time. As you saw by the title of this video though, I don't think that's right. Flaws aside, Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time is a game fully deserving of its status as an early 2000s classic. It was a phenomenal game for its time, and having only played it almost 2 decades later, it was still fully worth experiencing. With Ubisoft remastering the game for next-gen consoles, it's hopeful this game might make somewhat of a return to the forefront of modern game enthusiasts' minds, the way series like Devil May Cry have. This game deserves far more love, recognition, and if you're fortunate enough to experience it, I highly recommend doing so. Chances are, you'll be happy you did. Thank you all for watching this video. If you enjoyed, then be sure to slice that like button in half, subscribe to my channel if you are new, and tell me in the comments what you thought. Blackblade's Backlog Babble was an experiment that led to some great videos, but ones I feel hurt my channel's growth overall. So hopefully achieving what I was able to with it in a series like this instead might help in both analytical growth and frequency of uploads. Still, most important to me is that you, the viewers, like what you see. So once again, tell me if you'd like to see more of this, and I'll read it as soon as I can. See you all next time, goodbye.